Welcome back. Boris Johnson says he's getting tough on law and order, unveiling a wave of new policies, including more prison places and an extension of stop and search powers. With me is Kit Malthouse, the new Minister for Policing and Crime and a long-time colleague of the new PM. Thank you very much, Minister.
Pleasure.
So let's start, first of all, perhaps you've seen it, Michael Heseltine, Betty Boothroyd, they've written an op-ed in the Sunday Times talking about no-deal Brexit being the most grotesque act of national self-harm committed in peacetime by a British government. It's a big accusation, particularly coming from a doyen of your policy.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of hyperbole being thrown about as we approach the date of the 31st of October. But in the end, even people like Lord Heseltine, great figures from the past, who have never quite reconciled themselves to the idea that we're going to leave the European Union, are going to have to focus on the fact that that's what the British people commanded us to do, and that's what the government is committing to do at the end of October.
Do you think we're ready, October 31st?
I think we will be ready, yes. I mean, obviously, there's a huge amount of work to be done between now and then. You know, the Cabinet committees were meeting on a daily basis. You know, Michael Gove is leading the charge. He's been in Northern Ireland recently, talking to them about preparations there. The Prime Minister has made it very clear that the Treasury has to put money forward to help with those preparations and also to be ready to ameliorate any impact there may be, well, if we do leave with no deal. Alongside that, obviously, profoundly, the government is trying to get a deal, and we want the Europeans to recognise that a deal is in both of our interests, that they need to start talking to us about what that might look like.
And specifically on policing, I mean, let's look. There was a document that was leaked to my colleague Sam Coates not that long ago about the consequences in the first day, the first fortnight, the first month of a no-deal Brexit, and it's got some pretty stark conclusions about what might well happen. Actually, we've got the document right here, and particularly in that middle column, security, possible in the first fortnight, possible increased risk of serious organised crime, people smuggling, illegal migration, and then look at the far right, heightened policing resource over the first month, unsustainable, operational gaps continue to emerge. This is kind of scary stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to comment on leaked government documents, as you would imagine, but it is fair to say that the police, like every other part of the government, needs to be prepared for no deal, and we need to make sure that those forces across the land are doing what they need to do to make sure that they can continue to function in the event of no deal. Now, there are lots of impacts, if that comes to pass, that need to be thought about, and we are pretty clear that there are workarounds for most of them to make sure that we can be in as good a position as we are now.
So you're ready to provide more police officers for, you know, when it talks about consumer panic and increased risk of people smuggling?
Well, I don't think these things are necessarily going to come to pass, but it's certainly the case that the police...
These are real risks, though,
Yeah, but the police need to be ready in all eventualities for risks. I mean, you know, policing is about handling risk. As you may remember, I spent 4 years as Deputy Mayor for Policing in London, and one of the things that taught me is that you need to be ready for the unexpected. And so making sure that the police force, in its widest sense across the whole of the country, is ready for any eventuality, whether it's Brexit-related or otherwise, will be a key part of the strategy.
And you've talked, and indeed Boris Johnson has talked about having more police officers, and 20,000 extra officers is the big promise. How much is that going to cost?
So the first year we've scoped out looks about 500 million. We reckon about 1.1 billion over the whole period. But what the Prime Minister has said quite clearly is that 20,000 is the number we need to focus on. Now, I'm in conversation with the wider policing family about the practicalities and logistics of delivering those 20,000 over the next 36 months, and whatever costs fall out of that, obviously we'll have to have discussions with the Treasury.
So it could be even more than 1.1 billion.
Well, let's see where we get to, because there's lots of other aspects to be looked at. I mean, one of the pleasing things that the Prime Minister is kicking off this weekend as well is for us to realise that this is a system that we're dealing with. It's not just about policing, that we also have to look at the criminal justice system, the prison system, offender management, the courts, the Crown Prosecution Service, that all of this fits together as a system for managing crime and hopefully pushing it downwards as far as we possibly can. And so he's making some announcements today about, more funding going into the prison system, that will have more prison places, to provide for more violent offenders to spend more time inside. Then tomorrow he's holding a round table on violence specifically with, members of the criminal justice system coming together with the policing community to talk about what we could do to drive violence down in the country.
But have you worked out, presumably you have at this stage, where those extra police officers are actually going to go? I mean, where are they most needed right now?
No, so that's one of the conversations that we'll be having with police and crime commissioners and chief constables across the... So the stage looks like this. So we're at about 123,000 police officers at the moment. There was a plan already afoot from £1 billion of extra funding last year to recruit another 3,500 across the country. We're now putting in place to launch in September the next wave to get the 20,000 on top of that over the next 36 months.
So
and between then and now, we have to have a conversation about the deployment of those police officers and critically what they're going to be doing. Because what the public want to see is a restored sense of governance of the public realm, right? Alongside some of the enhancements to stop and search that we're putting in place today to deal with the big rise in knife crime that we really want to address assertively, we do need to address this general sense among the public that they want more reassurance from their police officers.
And do you kind of concede that extra police officers is certainly a good thing, and many people within the police and elsewhere will be relieved to see that? Although, first off, it may not quite even get us back to the peak in 2010. I mean, we're not necessarily even going to hit that peak of pre-austerity, are we?
Well, we need to get the numbers back up because what we want to do is both increase the capacity and the effectiveness of the police. Now, I've got a 36-month job to get these 20,000. That's a big enough job on its own. It'll be the biggest expansion in policing probably ever. And so once we get to that stage, let's see where we are. The critical thing, though, is not so much to focus on the number of police officers, but on the product, on what are the crime figures doing. And, we have seen, unfortunately, over the last couple of years, an alarming rise, for example, in serious youth violence, which mirrors a rise we saw back in 2006, 7 and then in 8, that we need to get on top of and arrest. And that will be the primary focus. We can get obsessed, as we obviously do in government, on inputs, but really we need to focus on outputs. And what the public want is to see a reduction in crime generally.
But, again, police officers is one thing, but are you going to have a place for them to actually work out of? I mean, there are big concerns about... Many police stations have been shut down, about 600 over the last few years. So are you going to start actually buying them back? Are you going to start building new police stations?
Well, we do need to talk about logistics. I mean, when we first announced the 20,000 police officers, there was some hilarity in the media because I referred to one of the restraints being access to lockers. Police officers carry a lot of equipment, and so 20,000 lockers is a lot of space. Pleasingly, I've already had contacts from local government colleagues, councillors and others, saying that they would be happy to work with us looking for the space that we need for police officers. And there's certainly, I think, an opportunity there for us to look across the whole of the estate of the public sector. Local government, certainly in some parts of the country, the fire service and the police service are already working together to see what we can do to embed police officers as part of that wider family. And it speaks, as I say, to a general systemic approach to crime that we need to take account of now. We can't arrest our way necessarily out of these problems. We all need to work together on the system alongside, as I say, more assertive enforcement.
You can't arrest your way out, but your boss, Priti Patel, talks about people needing to feel terror towards the police. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
Well, we certainly want criminals to be in fear of the police detecting them and catching them and putting them inside, yes. I mean, we know that the greatest deterrent to crime is the perception of the likelihood of getting caught. And that's psychologically what we need to increase. I mean, one of the advantages, for example, of Section 60 stop and search, which the Home Secretary has announced she's expanding powers of today, is that it speaks to a kind of high-profile police presence in a particular geography that raises the perception of the likelihood of detection of a knife. And that means that you're going to diminish the likelihood that somebody is going to carry one in the first place. And prevention is really what we're after.
But there are also other concerns with stop and search about potentially increasing racial tension as well. I mean, proportionally, by far and away, the biggest proportion of people who are stops and search are black young men for the most part.
Yeah, look, the same was true back in 2008 when we instituted a big push against knife crime in London. And it's definitely the case that, we have to work very closely with all communities across the country to make sure that stop and search is done in a sensitive and professional way. Now, things have changed. The vast majority of uniformed officers now wear a body camera. So the interaction between them and the person who's being searched can be filmed, which will lead to, a professionalisation and, in fact, a better reaction from the person who's being searched as well. But, in many parts of the country, there are people stepping forward from all sorts of communities, particularly parents, saying they are so concerned about the welfare of their young people that they recognise that while stop and search is controversial and can be assertive, it's necessary when you're facing a crisis like this.
Very quick question, because we're almost at the end. When's the next election going to be?
Oh, I have absolutely no idea. I hope it won't be until the end of the 5-year term, which is 2022.
OK.
But who knows?
OK, you hope so. OK, well, Kit Malthouse, we'll see whether there will indeed be that election sooner or later.